Tēnā koutou katoa. Kua hui hui mai nei e tēnei rā, nei ka mihi ake. Ko te aroha tōko maunga, ko Piako tōko awa, ko Anne-Marie Case-Miller tōko ingoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning and welcome to you all. My name is Anne-Marie Case-Miller. I am the Regional Coordinator, one of them, along with Ana Kama, and a member of the SMASH Committee. And it's my pleasure to be hosting today along with our SMASH Chair, Noldi, whom most of you will know. Just very quickly, some housekeeping. The fog is actually now lifting. However, we have been instructed, in case it descends again, that in the case of an emergency to please head up the stairs and meet in the car park. If there's fog and we're panicking, there's a high chance we'll end up in the lake. So we'll head out that way. Also, smoking is outside as well, please, or vaping as well. And the bathrooms and toilets are at the back of the room if you haven't found them already. If you haven't already done so, please scan in with the COVID scan, which is back up in the foyer. We will bring that down here though. And if you're not feeling well, we won't be offended if you leave. Hopefully no one's been to Wellington. Actually, don't tell me. Anxiety will go high. Now, I left it at the table, but you will have a conference book, which Noldi and Louise has put together and is holding up. That has got a wealth of information in there for you. It's also got places for you to take notes, and it's got the bios of all our speakers as well. We're hoping today is going to be really interactive and a fun day, so make sure if you've got questions, write them down because the speakers will take questions at the end of their presentations as well. So hit them with the hard ones. I think that's all from me. I'm going to hand over to and introduce you to Noldi Rust.
Grazie mite nand, mein Name is Noldi, und mir wohnt in Parongia. Sorry about that, I can't speak fluent te reo like she can, but I can speak a bit of Swiss German, so I thought I'd better start off with that because I didn't want to be outdone by Anne-Marie, so there we go. But I will speak English from now on. So hey, welcome along on behalf of SMASH. It's fantastic to have you all here. It's just good to get back around the table again. Last year we obviously couldn't do it owing to COVID, so it's certainly good to get back around and and do some face-to-face discussions. So welcome along on behalf of SMASH. We've been going for 11 years now, running events, field days, workshops, conferences like this all over the country. So I just want to mention our valuable sponsors that are part of us, you know, that we couldn't do it without them. And number one, of course, DRNZ's our partner. They're our main funder, so we couldn't do it without them, so we really appreciate that. And then behind them, we've got some sponsors, some nationwide sponsors that have been really, really invaluable for a whole number of years, namely Pioneer. There is there, Craig Maxwell's here from Pioneer, and Kyle, I think, yep. Welcome, guys. And then we've got Balance, we've got some Balance guys here too, Marty and Barclay. Jeff, thank you. Rabobank, I'm not sure if anyone's here from Rabo at all. No. FMG. Yeah, FMG, welcome FMG guys, and then we've got LIC as well, and we've got a few LIC reps over there, so welcome along guys, thank you for coming. We've also got the Stay Well Trust over in the corner there. We've got Joyce and her team of helpers there. Wendy's eating a pie, so it's got to be good for you, or a muffin or something. But hey, utilise them, go and get some health checks done. They do your cholesterol checks and all sorts of things. Go over there in the breaks. It's a service they offer just to do an on-the-spot health check, so really valuable. And then we've also got members of the MPI and the Rural Support Trust over there. So welcome, guys. It's good to have you along. Thanks for coming. Cool. Yes. Oh, Rabobank's here. Yep. Welcome. Good. Grab a seat. Thanks for coming. Yeah. Busy man, eh? All right. Yep. And just going on. COVID's obviously been a bit of a headache, and there's a few places in Wellington that are obviously getting checked over. And that Irish bar that was checked over, I was there a few months back with, my man's here, and he's from Ireland. We were in Wellington, and we shot into the bar there, and these three other Irishmen walked in, and two of them were really tall, and one was quite short. And the barman said, oh, you must be triplets, you all look similar. And they go, and Mick, one of them, goes, yeah, we are triplets. And he goes, but how can that be? Because two of you are, 6'5", and one's only 4 foot. And he says, well, I'm Mick, and this is Pat, and that's Tat. And he said, well, we're triplets. And Mick, he said, I was born first, so I latched on to one breast, and then Pat was born next, and he latched onto the other one, and then there was no tit for tat. So, but anyway, we're not here to tell jokes. We're here to listen to some speakers. So I'm going to hand it back to Anne-Marie now, okay? And you're going to introduce our next speaker. So, look, welcome, enjoy the day. There's some goodies in your bags. There's some goodies on the table. So we just want you to relax and have a really informative, good day. Thanks for coming. Right.
Thanks, Noldy. I also want to acknowledge those watching via live stream, via the internet, and of course ability to ask questions on Facebook or YouTube. Please do so. We've got somebody monitoring that, and we'll screen the questions and possibly let them through. No, definitely ask the questions. We'd love the interaction. If you haven't already done so, please turn off your phones or put them on silent. You can check your emails later, have a break, just be here. And that was that was all that I needed to say there. Our next speaker comes from, a New Zealand legend is his lineage, one would say. He's the nephew of Wilson Whineray, but he's a legend in his own right. Fraser Whineray is the Fonterra Chief Operating Officer. He joined Fonterra in March 2020. Not long or around the time all the COVID turmoil happened, I believe. It was definitely a baptism by fire. He's responsible for the New Zealand manufacturing site and the global supply operations. He's also responsible for the sustainability, innovation, R&D, IT and safety, quality and regulatory teams. He's a busy man, and he's going to give us an update. What is the situation looking like going forward? Is it going to remain positive? We certainly hope so. We know where the exits are if it's not. But ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to please put your hands together and welcome Fraser Whineray.
Kia ora, everyone. Thanks very much for that very generous introduction. And it's certainly my privilege to be here at the Smash. Do you just call it Smash or Smash Conference? Smash something, but I'll just call it the Smash. And I've got so much gear to take home, including a great cup, a Smash cup. I'm certainly going to put that to good work around the Fonterra management team table and show them the treats you get when you come down to beautiful Lake Karapiro, a bit of an old stomping ground actually, because I used to be responsible for the Waikato Hydro Scheme for about a dozen years. And get to catch up with you guys here and online. So it's certainly my privilege to be here. I want to acknowledge also the Black Caps overnight. I didn't stay up like our Finance Minister and watch it, but it seemed like there was some pretty spectacular stuff. I heard there was one amazing catch, and I was trying to quickly YouTube that before. That's kind of my patience for cricket, is just to look at the highlights reel, but they are the first world champions in that Test series. Acknowledge all the Fonterra supplier farmers here, and also those at our peer cooperative at Tatua, and those who supply some of the other cooperatives as well, other companies as well. Also, just want to take a note, since I've got a nice, which I was about to put on, I don't have a lot of insulation up top here, the LIC beanie which came in the Smash bag, and just when I saw that I was thinking of Wayne McNee and his 8 years that he's done at LIC, and what a good job he's done there. Christopher Vella, we're amongst great successes here. Christopher Vella here. Stand up, Chris, so we can see, everyone can see who you are. That is the National Farm Manager of the Year. And I was at those awards at the Claudeland Centre, and it was a cracking night and well deserved. And your enthusiasm for animal welfare, which is shared with the vast majority of your peers, but the way you articulated that was fantastic, and we think that was a great representation of the care we have for our animals. So my role was described just earlier. I came back to the co-op the week after lockdown. If it had been the week of the lockdown, that would have been a slightly more stressful week, but nonetheless, it's been pretty busy since we went into level 4. I didn't get to meet my team for 9 weeks. There was only about 10 of us at the Fanshawe Street office. You couldn't travel around any sites, obviously, for fear of spreading the stuff, and I certainly didn't want to get in the way of sites when we're still processing 38 million litres a day at that point and needed to round out a season. But most of my attention at that point was focused on how we make sure we don't have if we had a COVID peak smack over the milk curve, how we prepared to do that, because there's a lot that needs to happen from the farm vat through to our global customers, which all needs to happen in this great hourly choreography, and any one of those skill sets isn't there, then the thing can fall over. So starting with the manufacturing and shipping, and I'll touch on some of the COVID things shortly. So in the outlook, I'd see, I'll just go back. I started my career in the dairy sector, did about the first dozen years in and around it. I was on the technical training program, so I did my dairy dip at Massey in '93. Another member of the exec, Kelvin Wickham, who's based in Amsterdam, looking after kind of the non-Asia Pacific, China piece, so the rest of the whole world. He was also on that program as well. That's a 50-year partnership with Massey University now. It's been going for that long, and that plus all the dairy craft for our operators, plus apprenticeships, which have got a big program there. All of those skills are really important to pump in year out, so that we can take care of all of the milk, which is even better chilled now than it was. So thanks very much for that. Makes our job in the factories a lot easier. We need all those skills to keep coming through. So I was fortunate to be part of that training program. Did a couple of years as a technical officer at Kiwi Dairies and also Southland, and then on whey proteins, put in the WPC80 plant there at Kiwi. I was part of that team. And then I was in Southeast Asia, in Singapore and Bangkok with the New Zealand Dairy Board. And then came back, joined Credit Suisse, and we started merging the dairy co-op, Southland with Alpine, that entity with Dairy Group. Kiwi got Northland, and then the whole thing came together. So my history with it is largely around when it was in its old state, which was a dairy board and manufacturing co-ops. Lots of risk and opportunity out there with all of COVID, and I've been asked to touch on a couple of questions today. We've put out a strong range for next season. It's probably the highest opening range we've put out as Fonterra, and that's about 12 billion that'll flow provincially through that. For the whole sector, it's probably about 14.5 billion. So it's great to see that income coming in for New Zealand, because whether you're an individual or a company or a household or a business, at some point you've got to earn more than you spent. And at the moment, New Zealand, exports are vital to any economy, and that part of it is going well for New Zealand and for you. But notwithstanding that range isn't a cap and a floor, by the way. I'll just hasten to add that the season is long. The things can vary, and what we have to do is make sure we look, how's it looking over the long term. So 3 questions I was asked to look at today is what's the situation looking like going forward? Will it be positive? And kind of referred to over what timeframes. What's the ongoing effects of COVID-19? And what does Fonterra foresee, and how are we trying to adapt to the situation that's in front of us? Firstly, I'd say the global economy is strongly rebounding on average. There are some pockets of it which are still well behind, and some bits of it are very strong, but the bits that we're attached to tend to be doing pretty well economically. That is a bit of a rebound on a decline last year, so if you actually go back a couple more years, that's the real criteria. Is it up from that point? And I think it is slightly up, but it's probably rebounding potentially a bit fast, and that's because a whole bunch of governments put the foot on the gas with monetary stimulus, i.e. dropping interest rates, fiscal stimulus, i.e. spending money, and when that goes too fast, you get inflation. When inflation goes up, interest rates go up, and then the whole thing has to sort of re-sort itself out. And the other reason why the economy is looking good is because it's got a horse-sized adrenaline drip in the backside. which is actually funding a lot of all of that fiscal stimulus that I mentioned. But that can't last forever, otherwise we would actually just do that forever, and then we don't have to really worry about probably even paying taxes. We can just keep printing money, but that's a Zimbabwe strategy, so that doesn't kind of last forever. So it's not evenly spread, but not having a one-trick pony is actually very important, and I'll come back to that later. If we look at one economy that is going particularly well is China. Now, China's about 1/3 of the milk solids, and if you divide the world up, so you look at the bits where we don't have massive trade barriers and can't get in easily behind the border, and then the population of the remaining bit of the world that can actually afford New Zealand milk solids, then about 1/3 of the solids is certainly not out of proportion to have that going to China. And the Chinese government has really been pushing the benefits of the dairy through COVID. That economy has bounced back strongly. They can lock things down pretty hard and open them up quickly. And the China Dairy Association, the equivalent of Dr. Fauci in the US, the Chinese equivalent of that, said during COVID, was last year, people in particular demographics, children, pregnant women, elderly, need to lift their daily dairy intake from 300 to 500 grams. And of course that's only 200 grams, but there's just lots of people. So when that happens, that can put quite a surge on. But largely it was leaning in to the notion of the nutrition that dairy actually is capable of doing and is stunning at doing. Yogurt cultures were a key part of that. Cultures that go into the yogurts, probiotics. I mean, we lifted our probiotic sales about sixfold into China over the last year. Now that might have only been another 3.5 tonnes, but when those things sell for 3 million a tonne, that actually does make a difference. Those things are sold in bottles about that big and made down in Palmerston North next to our science centre. So a lot of positive referencing to the nutrition benefits of dairy, and kiwi fruit found itself in the same place as well. The word got around on WeChat or whatever the social media platforms, kiwi fruit's got lots of vitamin C and that'll stop COVID, and suddenly whoosh, there you go. You only need a small fraction of the east coast of China to dive into that and you're in good shape. But it is about health, and that's what we ultimately are here for, to deliver that globally. The supply chain has been tight. That's kind of a secondary dynamic of COVID. Because of everyone staying at home and because everyone getting lots of money to spend, like the 1.8 trillion Biden package, they go, what am I going to spend this on? Now, you can't spend it on services, like going to Super Bowl or whatever you do in the Munich Beer Fest or whatever it would be in Europe, or tourism, so you spend it on stuff. And so everyone's gone and bought new couches and tallies because they're spending so much time at home, they might as well anyway, and computers and desks and chairs, and they've all renovated their kitchens and garages. It's all happening in this global simultaneous splurge, and that puts shipping well beyond what its actual maximum capacity is. And when that happens, you've got 2-week waits off Long Beach. One point there, it was actually faster to go through Panama Canal and offload on the East Coast, because it's a bit going from China to US and China to Europe, which now has shipping rates on a spot basis 6 times higher than what they were. And it's just really, it's not because of the COVID flu bug, that doesn't affect shipping. It's not because the ships can't sail. Everything that floats is pretty much trying to work the Pacific pretty hard. So what happens there is people go, well, let's skip old New Zealand because we've got to make up time. Now, fortunately, we have a partnership with Silver Fern Farms, which we set up after the GFC, the last time shipping was in a crisis, and that's called Katahi. And that now has 50 other customers, and that exports about 1/3 of New Zealand's container traffic. That Katahi has a partnership with Maersk, which puts us in the top 3 customers of Maersk, and Maersk is the biggest global container shipper. And when you're in trouble, because if we don't swing $50 million across the rail of a ship every day, you don't invoice it, and you can build up working capital and storage and everything at a heck of a rate of knots, you need partners that you can trust. And Maersk is absolutely that. And so that's been very important for New Zealand, to get imports in, empty containers in, so we can ship the stuff out. So that's tight, but we're going well. You would have seen at the half-year results that were published, we're 8 days behind on shipping. That's $400 million of working capital. So getting the stuff over the rail is as important as picking the milk up off the farm, because it can all get jammed up pretty quickly. That supply chain won't relieve for a while. actually. What it needs is people to either basically stop spending as much money on goods. Only a little bit, and a little bit will pull back, so either they've got less money to spend or they spend it on services or something made in their own countries, in Europe and America, and then it's like a road, you know, once you get just slightly too much traffic on it, it jams, and that's actually what's happened to global shipping at the moment. Interestingly, when I was going through Eltham, we've got two sites at Eltham, and one of them has a lot of slice-on-slice cheese businesses for Burger Kings and McDonald's and all different countries, and they can run on slightly different lines. And if you were in the Eltham factory during COVID last year and you got no news, you'd probably work out what governments were doing in particular countries in Asia, because suddenly the McDonald's one for China would be off to the races, and then it would stop, and then the Burger King for Malaysia would be going over there. And so it was quite amazing how the whole global geopolitical lockdown was manifested in a floor print in Eltham, simply based on their COVID responses. There's less of that violent swinging now going on, so food service lines in particular are less violent for two reasons. One is I think governments have got their sort of how they're going to live with or deal with or vaccinate for COVID under control. And the second reason is because the alternative way of food service businesses getting food to their customers has really exploded. You know, basically the Uber Eats and all of that sort of stuff. So people still can't be bothered cooking a lot of the time, apart from baking, and that's why butter and everything else went crazy in New Zealand as well. But they'll still call up their favourite restaurant and it gets delivered. So food services open even if there are some lockdowns. Our people overseas, just wanted to shout out to them a bit. We've got, if you take people that aren't in the Australasian sort of environment, bubble, where it's been pretty, you know, like this, apart from Wellington. You know, normally it's the Jaffas getting a hard time, but it's Wellington this time, so that's good, isn't it? There's 6,500 others overseas, and they're in countries which might not have good health systems, might not be paying for vaccinations, and some places just haven't been able to really live normal lives, but they've kept doing the mahi, they've kept the work getting done. The Saudi team was in that factory, they just went in there and stayed there for 2 weeks so they could keep running that and not bring the bubble home. In Chile, most people there will have known someone that's probably died or was very ill from COVID, because there's been a huge amount of COVID go through the Latin American cone. That is a daily fresh business, and they've kept that going. In Sri Lanka, people set up distribution centres at their homes to make sure that they could get products in and around the communities and neighbourhood, since the traditional distribution centre channels were jamming up, and we're a huge supplier into Sri Lanka of nutrition. So they've been doing it pretty hard. I mean, in America, our people haven't been to the office for over a year, and so makes us, you know, we've all had our challenges here, and we still do. Getting labour in is a key one, particularly on farm. And but they've had some pretty interesting experiences. And for us as a lead team under Miles, it was going very well. We actually haven't met in person since I started, and I haven't met two people on the lead team face to face. But we've been having to do the whole lot virtually. And thank goodness we've got those people in market under this new structure, because then that can provide leadership in all those challenging situations I just mentioned. So good, strong demand, even for the humble whole milk powder. Whoops, I'll just go back to that. And that's because of those things I mentioned, nutrition, the alternative channels opening up for getting quality food products to people, and a lot of people look at that bag in front of you and say that that is a commodity. It is less than 2% of the world's milk is in whole milk powder. It is actually a stunning niche which New Zealand owns and we invented here. It involves a lot of intellectual property which is still getting developed, and it's very difficult for our customers to replicate that at scale. The nitrogen packing, the barriers, the agglomeration, the lecithination, and the way that looks. And one of the key components of it is its flavour. And the flavour comes from what you feed your cows, which I can see there's some samples of over here. So I'll listen to a bit of that after my talk, because then I can be armed with a dangerous amount of grass knowledge. But it comes down to that flavour. And when you're early into a country and have a big share of a country, the flavour's carried in the fat, and that comes from what you feed the cows because you do the first two processes on farm, make the food, the cow turns it into an amazing product, and then we do the third and the customer does the fourth. We have low carbon, low cost, uniquely sort of flavoured and profiled dry matter, and that combined with great herd management and the good people at LIC, etc., that is part of why even something which is whole milk powder has some differentiation. Now, increasingly the differentiation isn't about the what. It's not that great off-farm temperature we're getting and all of that, and the grading you provide or achieve. It's the how. Increasingly those customers, large customers, are saying, what was the carbon footprint? Were the animals looked after, Christopher? Will you be our spokesperson on that? You convince them. How was the environment? And that's what's flowing back through now and from customer needs where they want to be to FEPs and the farm environmental plans and the cooperative difference. And that is trying to get that direct link end to end about the how of the milk and all the customers' expectations leading up to that point, as opposed to simply the nutrition. The nutrition's great, we want to improve it, but the how is increasingly valuable. And that's why you'll see New Zealand skim $300 a tonne higher than European skim, even if you put them through the same lab, they'd test the same. $300, that's almost 10%. Why would they pay that premium? And a lot of it is to do with what's happening here and our low carbon position. Vaccination is going to be key. That I've already talked about, focus on that hourly choreography that has to happen, the human capital we need with all sorts of quite specific skills. You can't just go and employ anyone to go and do these things. Same as what you need people with skills and capabilities on farm as well. So not having them ill because of COVID or off work because of COVID is essential. And we almost have a higher risk profile now than we did last year because we've got an apathetic community, variants which seem to be far more good at jumping hosts, and we're not vaccinated. There's only one country that dealt with the virus early and then got vaccinated early, and that's Singapore. And most countries that actually had problems early on, they're racing ahead with vaccination, and that's their only choice. But we really, coming into this peak, we're not going to be sufficiently vaccinated as a country for us to avoid a lot of the risk mitigations we're going to have to put in place in the factories and things, because it keeps mutating. We've talked about shipping, we've talked about labour in New Zealand, and the border is very important for getting in particular skills that we don't have here, and we'll see where that great reset goes. But our operating model does diversify where the kilos of our suppliers go, and that's important, and which channel they go through. So now I'll just play a little video which speaks to some of that diversification.
New Zealand's largest company is emerging as a bright spot in the economic gloom.
This is quite extraordinary. So there's an agility there, and you're able to respond to the notion that flex is required.
That breadth of scale, the number of customers around the world and markets that we operate in, you have the flexibility to move product around.
They may be an economic saviour at the end of all of this. The farmer might yet again be the hero of our economy.
click to the next one there. The hand sanitizer, we had to swing a bit of product mix actually to make a bit more ethanol, which we do, and made an extra amount of ethanol for 6 million units of that hand sanitizer, which, suddenly that, along with toilet paper, which everyone's probably still got a year's supply of toilet paper down in the basement. I know what's going on here. Wellington's just gone and raided all supermarkets for toilet paper as well. We did quite a number of those things, which helped New Zealand's sovereignty on some of those aspects of the COVID response. But the diversification is important. The ultimate non-diversification during the start of the COVID crisis was actually when China went into lockdown, and they're coming into Chinese New Year, and the crayfish industry of the Gisborne East Coast goes to China into restaurants, and the restaurants were shut. And that was kind of like 100% concentration of market, and overnight it goes from 100 to 0. So that's I always refer to the Gizzy crayfish as have we got all our eggs in one basket, and we keep a close eye on that. So this is our strategy. It has been for a while. The fact that it's been steady since the reset sort of in 2019, we need to tackle the mortgage and just get things tidied up, and under Miles and John Monaghan and now Peter McBride's leadership has been really important. There's a number of things, and I'll give some examples. In the food service one there, of course, getting through the tariffs into the United States is tricky, so rather than us try and push through that, we've got intellectual property to make particular food service products, so we've licensed that into Land O'Lakes. They make the products with American milk behind the border, and then we collect royalties with the intellectual property, so we didn't even have to touch a kilo of milk solids or a ton of stainless steel, which is one example of leveraging IP. Proteins are important, increasingly in sports of active interest, important in ageing well. In fact, Precious McKenzie is in the same building as my parents in Albany in Lifestyle Village, and he hosts some weight strengthening for all the oldies, particularly the old ladies, including my mum, like to go and work out with Precious in the mornings down there in the gym. Innovation, it's not just about what's in the product. One of them will be things like milk vat telemetry. That saved us buying 5 trucks, so it's dropped our fleet by 1% so far, and having to find 16 tanker drivers to fill those 5 trucks as well. So innovation can exist at all parts of the supply chain. Co-op, we implemented Te Amudu, going from coal to wood chip. 10% reduction in coal use, which we'll be out of by 2037. That was commissioned even though we couldn't get some of the people in from overseas. That was New Zealand's largest decarbonisation project last year for the country. But it's not very tweetable. I've stood in front of it. I don't have a Twitter account and taken a selfie with the staff with it, but not many people drive by and tweet it, which is probably why not many people are celebrating it for the sustainability achievement it is. And efficiency is key. We always have to keep chipping away at continuous improvement right across the 20,000 of us on supply chain, in manufacturing and innovation, labs, capital, data, digital, etc. It just keeps going. And I've talked to the how of that, not just the what of what we do, and how increasingly important that is to the likes of the Nestlés and Starbucks, etc. So just as I wrap up, I'll play a video which talks to some of the expectations through the words of farmers and customers and employees. They're 3 key sets, but not the only 3 that we have to now increasingly listen to make sure that the cooperative will be sustainable for the long term, sustainable as an entity and therefore as a business, and therefore for all of our cooperative suppliers and everything that they do as well. So there's plenty to do. I think we're travelling well and picking up momentum, but there's certainly no end of risk and opportunity to both manage and execute on. So here's a little video, and then we'll rip into some Q&A.
I think Fonterra has a clear focus on where it's heading in the future. It is focusing on innovation and sustainability and the impact on the environment, and that's the sort of organisation that New World and Foodstuffs want to partner with into the future.
The performance of Fonterra is massively personal to us. I am a third generation dairy farmer and we have 4 children. I feel it's vital, 100% vital, that Fonterra sticks together so then our children have got a real solid company to come into. I feel very strongly about that.
The important thing for me that it achieves is it provides a sense of community. The Breakfast Club isn't just about providing food, it's just about providing that togetherness, and it's a way of bringing the students together at the start of the day.
With Fonterra distinguished products, consistency in quality and great customer services, the Rouge was able to promise and deliver quality product to the Sudanese consumers. We are proud that our partnership with Fonterra distinguished us in the local market and gave us the opportunity to surpass major competitors in Sudan.
Creamy. Creamy. Nice.
I'm really proud to be a part of the co-op, and I really feel like we're travelling in the right direction. The cooperative difference is really important for our farmers because it helps to prepare them for what's coming in the future, not only in terms of environmental regulation, but milk quality and animal welfare as well. And a lot of that is customer driven rather than regulation based. So it really helps us to prepare our products and the markets that they're going to.
Things I like about the co-op are that we are all in together, bit of herd mentality. I feel secure that we produce the milk on the farm and then we've got a big business behind us doing the best that they can to add the value and sell it worldwide.
Rightio, with that, let's have a little bit of Q&A and happy to take any questions you got on that or other topics you want to talk about. Shoot. There's one. I think there's a roving microphone for the benefit of those online.
Hey Fraser, Pete Morgan. It was a great overview, thanks, particularly of the transportation and the logjam. I hadn't really appreciated the real reason for that. Carbon neutrality, we're going to all be pushing towards that, and the options that we're looking like might be in the line for us directly on farm are slow and yet to prove themselves, and going to be a significant barrier. And it's really cool to see the progress that Fonterra has made. Does Fonterra have a stand then in terms of its involvement itself driving towards a real neutrality for itself as an entity, and particularly the factories overall, and where we stand as farmers as to how fast we should be pushing forwards?
Yeah, great. So a couple of things in there. So I'll split them up into the on-farm, off-farm pieces. The off-farm piece, I can see pretty clearly where that'll go, and I don't lose any sleep over that. We'll be out of coal by 2037. We have to work through then pretty much just gas and diesel. And so getting out of coal by 2037 is half the off-farm emissions. So if you look at a pie chart, we'll have about imagine 1% of it is global shipping. Getting stuff around the world is actually extremely carbon efficient. It's the same as, forgive me, some of the team have heard this before, it's the same as taking 4 tonnes of powder, sticking it on a dinghy with a 1 horsepower motor and going 24 knots. Right, that's actually what a fully laden Maersk ship does. And I bet you can't get 24 knots out of a dinghy with 1 horsepower, let alone with 4 tonnes of product on it. But that's a fully laden Maersk ship. So that's nothing, it's 1%. That is the equivalent of 80,000 cars in New Zealand. Right, so that's to ship 2.5 million tonnes. So, and Maersk is now investing, all its new fleet that will be working on now will be methanol or ethanol kind of driven. So they'll work at how to make those sustainably. So shipping's in good shape. 10 times that happens between the wharf and the vat, which is our bit. So that's at 1.7 million tonnes. Te Awamutu was an 80,000 tonne drop, and we will half of that 1.7 million is coal, and then the rest is pretty much split between some gas and some diesel and some other stuff. So that's what our main focus is on coal. We've done Brightwater, Te Awamutu, Stirling will be next, and then we've actually mapped out our program through to 2037 across the 8 remaining sites to go, excluding Stirling, and 4 of those are more significant, Waitoa and 3 in the South Island, so Waitoa on the north, 3 in the south, and then the other 4 sites are much smaller and not as hard to do. So we can see we've got to be, our commitments are 30% absolute down by 2030, so we'll do that through those coal changes, and then net zero off farm by 2050, and I've got no concerns about any of that. And that is a scientifically verified target against the Paris agreements, which is substantially less than 2 degrees. On farm, so if it's 1% for the shipping, 9% for the off farm, on farm is 90%. Right, that's just to give you a sense of proportion. So reducing on farm by 10% is the same as removing all of the emissions for everything that happens after the milk vat. Right, so that's how even 5s or 1s or 10%ers make a huge difference if we can deal with methane, largely methane, a little bit NOx, nitrous oxides. We do have direct investments and partnerships looking into a range of ways, whether it's to do with feed, the rumen, LIC's now, doing carbon schedules for its bulls selection. You have to cover quite a few different areas because you're dealing with something that's evolved over 60 million years, and nature's not lousy with energy efficiency. If the cow had a way to really make use of methane rather than burp it out, a bug would have been invented by nature to actually use all that and then make more milk, right? Because that's kind of how nature works over long time periods. So we have to work on a number of different angles to find that we can get a pasture-based solution for methane. And it's really important we get a pasture-based solution for methane before the overseas competitors that you'll have find a shed-based solution for it, right? Because we want to keep our free-range situation going on here with our cows. So on-farm, it's more of the R&D methane play. Off-farm, as I've described, I don't see any issue. So all it's kind of slightly different stages of evolution. But yes, no doubt the on-farm's the trickiest. But even as I said, 10% is a massive difference. And given what's coming through with He Waka Eke Noa, or the 5%, or the greenhouse gas legislation, which is 5% of the cows going in, 10% would give you 5% headroom against that too. So we've got trials, whether it's seaweed or other things going on. And we're not trying to DIY all that either. You've got to work with partners to get the intellectual, diverse thinking and opportunities, because we just can't invent all of that here.
Yeah, Fraser, the milk price is worked out from a milk price manual, which is, it's a man-made formula. It's administered by a milk price panel, which is hardly independent. So, when the milk price is high, it's a cost of goods to management when they're using that milk and making it into other products. So the higher the milk price, there's more of a squeeze on the margin. So, how does this affect management in their motivation and which leads into the performance of the company to increase that margin?
Yeah, so you raise a good point. And Jim Hepburn is the independent chair of that panel, and I can assure you the independent participants on that panel are no pushovers. We've got 2 representatives from our board on it, but they are fairly stridently independent in their views against that milk price manual, and they've actually got legislative reasons why those independents need to be. You're right, it is an artificial construct. It is actually off a product mix which is different to what Fonterra produces. It's got a far higher bias towards milk powders as opposed to the non-reference commodity products of cheese and casein and everything else. And so what happens is when you get a high whole milk powder price, that can really skew even the returns on those other products, plus also food service and consumer returns through those different channels. Because when you add value, you're typically selling a product for a price which is less dependent on the underlying commodity price. Therefore, as a higher value add mix means that as the higher the milk price is, you get an earnings squeeze, because it's much harder to pass or change the end consumer price or food service price based on that. As opposed to if it was a pure commodity play, then you just simply go, there's the commodity price, here's our margin on top, and so the earnings is relatively stable, yet the the value returns to the farmer are less stable because it's the milk check that is the majority of the revenue for a farm. So we work very hard and we come under a lot of pressure, and we've just announced an $8 midpoint, or $7.25, $8.75. And so then as we're thinking about next year and which products can we push forward on passing through some of that milk cost and which ones we can't, and therefore how do we go about making sure we can still maintain good earnings despite that high milk price. But make no mistake, when you kick a season off at that sort of level, which is the highest we've ever done in 20 years, yeah, that can make things a bit more challenging to achieve, you know, the earnings that we'd expect in a more normalised year. Yeah, but the markets do respond. You know, we're not an island, and nor's the global market, and American productions come up. And I don't think that'll end up in whole milk powder, but it certainly, the globe responds to a degree to those prices as well. And so then you'll find that, you know, there was a little bit of easing last GDT. We think it's in a good position, but and we've put out our range for the season, which expresses our confidence in that, between the top and the bottom. But you know, the more value add we get, then you probably end up with slightly more earnings volatility, unless you can get a deeper market for hedging out milk price at the other end. So if you can lock in value add sales and lock in the milk price for a season ahead, and there are some features which, you know, there are some products that do that for farmers, then you can actually lock in the earnings. But if you're reverse engineering a milk price at the end of a season based on a year's sales that you've already made to a customer for a certain price, you can't go back to the customer and say, can I have the hindsight price? Not many customers are willing to accept that.
Yes, so Fraser, thanks for talking through how we're sort of meeting customer expectations, and then I guess I'm talking about the carbon footprint, animal welfare, environment, and so on. Absolutely hear you and understand why we're doing that. I think the COVID example in China's version of Dr. Fauci is a really interesting one, in that it's sort of indicated how people's perception and the media can be a really powerful thing for, say, the consumer and their behaviours. So having experienced that, is Fonterra kind of doing anything to, again, influence the media or help with perception for health?
Yeah, well, and I think by media, I think we've got to separate out the New Zealand context with global context around where dairy sits in the mind space for a lot of the markets we sell to. New Zealand dairy production and actually agriculture is revered in most of, well, Southeast Asia is a very pure place to source high quality nutrition from, and it's highly trusted, and that's something that we don't want to undermine. That's built up over 50 years of anchor billboards, which, you know, when I was up there, sure, it wasn't we weren't doing the most sophisticated marketing back then in '97, but you know, the blue skies, the green grass, Mount Taranaki typically, and a cow. And many people, when Asia became wealthy enough and airfares became cheap enough, came down to New Zealand. I think a lot of the image they had of New Zealand was actually set up on the back of the marketing of New Zealand Dairy Board anchor products to that part of the world. And when they did come here, they actually couldn't believe that the poster was real, because that you could look out when you're flying in and, oh my goodness, the sky is blue and the grass is green and there's a cow over there, even in Cornwall Park in the middle of Auckland. So that leaves a strong impression with them, and we work with, you know, other dairy companies and cooperatives around the world and NGOs to help keep promoting that message on nutrition. Dairy protein is a stunningly good, and there's increasing aspects of the fat components as well. It's just unbelievable in terms of what it can do for nutrition. And, you know, there's a lot of there might be dairy-like proteins, so we're interested in those, and fermented ones. We have some opportunities we're pursuing there. There's plant-based products which we sometimes blend in as well with our products, but plant protein has an amino acid deficiency in its profile. You just can't, you can't overcome that, and that's why, you know, well, there was that terrible case in Australia recently of parents being charged with I think something like child abuse, because their 19-month-old looked like a 3-month-old and it had no teeth because it had been fed a vegan diet. So dairy protein is very highly valued and prized, particularly in New Zealand stuff, and that's what we want to keep building on. But as you opened your question, with the how aspects as well, which we already have a competitive advantage in, and we certainly don't want to lose that competitive advantage in terms of our low carbon, low cost position, but all those other things that have to happen. Other cows, Christopher, getting well looked after. That's top table here, you see.
Yeah, we've got another couple more questions, James and Vicky, to go. Fraser, the cooperative difference payment, that I'm interested in the imported feed component. And in my mind, I've just been to the field days, and a lot of people were talking to, they're crowing about having secured a very good contract for their PKE purchases. With the cooperative differences area of imported feed, and it does include, includes PKE, but also all sorts of other products, including maize, grain, and so on. I don't wonder if you just comment about whether the incentive or the disincentive is sufficient to stop people feeding imported feed, and what the effect of that is on manufacturing the product and the sale of it.
Well, there's incentives through that cooperative difference, but there are actually rules in the milk price in the contract around that as well. So there's the carrot, but there's also a bit of an edge to it, because if it's more than, I think we set the limit, which is for I think 5%, it will change the profile of the product. It can change its flavour. It's impossible to make butter that will live up to the customer's expectations because it cracks. And you've seen a case of this recently, probably in Canada, where a whole bunch of people in Canada were trying to work out why it is that the butter was so hard, and that was because they'd been overfeeding because they didn't have the same limitations on PKE. So there are two areas where that exists. One's an incentive, one's in the milk price, the 100-odd page contract with our suppliers. Increasingly, PKE, though, is going to fall into a how issue if it can't receive verification, because anything, palm is, and where it's made is quite a hot issue, for sustainable nutrition in terms of the global mindset. So we'd use about, 30,000-40,000 tonnes of palm oil, and most of that is certified. It's not quite where we all want it yet. The PKE is about 500,000 tonnes in New Zealand for, I think, Fonterra and other suppliers. So that's so we've kind of got the manufacturing side covered off with the FEI index, but I think the how is something that's going to have to be looked at. It is important, though, that animal welfare is considered in this discussion, because we do live in a country where, by and large, we're getting frequent enough rainfall to produce the dry matter, which, by and large, our free-range cows go and enjoy. But sometimes that doesn't always happen. It's a bit like when the hydro lakes go low. It's the same gig. It's the same rain. It's the same sky. And then you need something to back it up. And sometimes that might not always be the most palatable thing, but it's very important to either the cow being well or keeping the lights on in the case of hydroelectricity.
So we see a lot of artificial meats and things coming out in the market.
Where
do you think we are in terms of artificial milk, and will it be a threat?
Yeah, good question. And we do spend a lot of time thinking about that. And we have some investments which look at, and some partnerships to look into that and try and work out what would you have to believe, not just on cost, but it's actually water consumption and energy consumption for those competitors to actually be in a better position compared to the 2% of the world's milk that New Zealand produces in the ways that we're all familiar with. What will happen is, most likely, is those fermented products start off very expensive, and then they'll tackle the most complex or most expensive components of whatever they're trying to replicate first. Is it meat, or is it, I don't know, something like lactoferrin or things like that? Because to actually do it in bulk on protein and fat more efficiently than the cow, then you're still competing with 60 million years, right, of evolution. So that's actually quite a high barrier to beat. But it is possible they might be able to try and go after parts of protein or in particular. We're watching that closely. We think it's more of an and thing rather than or thing. It's how, you know, most of our products are consumed. 99.9% of our products are components. Even if it's milk in the tea, it's a component of a cup of tea. The only thing that isn't componentized actually is silver top unhomogenised milk in New Zealand, and you just guzzle it out of the fridge like that. That's kind of as close as you get to non-component. But everything else is consumer products or food service products or ingredients as a component. So we think about what is it we could do to add some different things, like we already had some plant stuff in and lecithin, and what can we add to make that better for our customers? I'm sorry, what was the first part of your question? It was just the dairy side? No, the meat. So yeah, I'll just finish off. The protein side of meat is one that's will be going after, the world will go after harder, because that has a much higher carbon footprint in the diet. Meat is actually consuming the capital of the animal, whereas milk is a sustainable process for the number of years that the cow is calving and providing milk. So that is actually quite an expensive way in terms of inputs of what you need to get a kilo of protein compared to a cow. So fake burgers and meat patties and all that sort of stuff, you've seen plenty of that. But to really go mainstream, it's all nice in OECD, modern economies, pumped full of monetary stimulus, government balance sheets, but to really go mainstream globally, it has to be cheaper. And so that's actually going to be one of the challenges for it. So is that because costs of producing meat are going to rise? Probably. And will the cost of meat alternatives come down? Yeah, most likely, with all the genetic engineering and stuff. So I'd be, dairy, I've got a lot more comfort in than if I was in red meat. So the two ways to reduce New Zealand household emissions, Motu did this tool for New Zealanders, which is quite helpful because it puts some facts into emissions rather than just the intuitive memes, is actually driving an electric car and red meat. Those are the two main ones. The rest of it's relatively trivial. And it didn't include have less butter for your cookies.
An extension from that same question, what is the difference between your Asian customers and your Western marketplace, both by their value to you as a business, but also their attitude to emerging alternatives?
Yeah, so in our half-year results, we had a slide there which showed by channel, so ingredients, food service and consumer, and then by area or region of the world, led by each of Kelvin, Tehan and Judith, so Asia Pacific, China and rest of the world. And we put the EBIT in there and the tonnes in each of those regions across the top. And that's actually, that shows where the value is in those markets. And it's quite different in each market, but largely that's a product of how tariffs have evolved since we were the gizzy crayfish to the UK, and then they joined the EU, and then we had to find a home for an ever-growing supply of milk from New Zealanders under the Dairy Board requirements to, it was a statutory exporter, and that's why we're in 120 countries and diversified. It's because we many of the countries we were actually selling to back when I was in the 80s and 90s were probably considered aid countries to most modern Western economies. So we actually don't get great access into those Western economies because they have strong farmer lobbies which actually keep the barriers high. So to get into those, they're typically ingredients markets for specialty things which don't actually undercut sort of the basic agriculture that happens in those economies. So Asia, of course, isn't really a great place to grow dry matter. You've got a big population, and so therefore they need to import quite a lot of those foods, the non-vegetable type foods, unless it was chicken or fish or something like that. So there we do get much better access in terms of trade. China's tariffs are coming down next year for New Zealand, and so their proposition is largely they need nutrition for their societies. So their view of sustainability is much more, I need nutrition for me and my family. And consume, if you ask them about sustainability, and in some instances they're very concerned about animal welfare. And a lot of this depends on their culture and religion, and in Saudi, the research shows you that Saudi housewives have got the most carbon guilt out of any of our sort of Middle East, Southeast Asia customers because of the exports of oil from that country, and so they feel like they have to offset that somehow by buying a low carbon something or other. In the West, it's moved a lot further, and New Zealand's part of that. And it's where the carbon and natural capital and all those things are dialing up much more strongly to the top, to a decision tree of consumption, and the demand on the customers knowing much more about that. But that's not to say that. So China's very much into that too, actually, because there's you go down the eastern seaboard. There's many Chinas in China, and that's kind of a bit more of a, increasingly wealthy and interested in those sorts of aspects. But at its base, quality nutrition, and it's safe. It's got to be safe food. Then you start moving up into, the animals, and carbon, and natural capitals like water and things like that as well. So they are quite different. And I think that's something that we kind of almost need to remember here, that, to sort of, if we do, help make say a whole milk powder or modify it slightly to make it cheaper so it's more accessible nutrition to some markets. If you took a Western view, sometimes it might be, oh no, you can't do that, they should just have whole milk powder. But that's a false dichotomy for them. They're either getting nutrition or they're not. It's not let them eat cake. So I think, there's actually a lot of different views which we're not necessarily communicating back through from markets into New Zealand as well, to just give some balance to that thinking. But in the end, it is customer driven all the way back through co-op difference and FEPs, and those demands change over time, and we're trying to maintain our competitive advantage against them, against your competitors are in America and Europe and Ireland and places like that. So it's our job to try and make sure we don't get behind the eight ball.
I've just got one question here. We were fortunate enough to put our farm into My Milk last year, yep. and I kept my shares, and I had to bring this one up. And the share value is dropping faster than the Indian cricket players overnight. And there's a lot of talk about the shares and the value there. Have you got just a couple of minutes to ease my fears about that?
Yeah, I can't offer financial advice. I'm certainly not going to do that. If I could offer great financial advice, I probably wouldn't still need to be working. So capital structure has got its consultation process going on. There's been more than 60 meetings on that, a lot of consultation coming back. There's more meetings starting again because we have to get this one right. Now, whether the share price will go up or down, I don't know. It was outlined in the consultation book. A restricted market can actually have a different price to what an unrestricted one can. But all I'd say on capital structure is we've got to engage back through that process. And I'm not heavily involved in that. It's kind of more, I can't do that and then do what I have to do in my day job as well. So some other parts of the team are running front and centre on it. But what I will say is the number one issue on the survey, before we kicked off that consultation process, was you wanted a sustainable co-op. And that's actually what this is about, and in my view. And co-ops, as I mentioned earlier to you, Noldy, they can't actually be recreated again because you can't get enough capital from a farming base to build a scale manufacturing plant anymore. In the old days you could, because they used to be a lot smaller, and all 70 valleys in New Zealand used to have a little one, and that was kind of how it worked. But you haven't got $300 or $400 million to build one now, and so they're a rare animal actually, and we need to treat them carefully. And that's what they're doing this for, and there'll be some in the flexibility that's designing into that capital structure is a very important part of maintaining a farmer-controlled cooperative, which is number one. Great. Thanks very much, everybody.
Before you sit down, thanks very much. Yeah, big hand for Fraser. Thanks, Fraser. No, just stay here. We've just got Anne-Marie's got a little gift for you there. But yeah, thanks for that. Couple of key points. Proteins sought after, milk proteins, and I like the way Fonterra is just looking at sustainability for the future, because that's hugely important, because big company that we're proud of. Milk proteins are sought after, and the whole PKE thing just reiterates again for my Pioneer mates down there how good maize silage is for the dairy diet. So Pioneer maize and grass is obviously a very healthy diet for number one. So thanks for that again, and Anne-Marie's got a little gift, so thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Anne-Marie. Look at this.
More Smash stuff, yeah.
And a bit of a bottle of fresh milk in here.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Yeah, good. Cheers, Fraser, thanks very much. Hey, we're fortunate to have a talk like that. Thanks a lot. You will just have a quick 5-minute break, stretch your legs, use the bathrooms, or grab another coffee and a muffin, and then we'll go into the next discussion with Alistair. So thanks very much. Oh yeah, just before you, who's travelled the furthest? Got a couple of